Hello listeners, welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Sean.
And I'm Sarah. Today we will explore Treasure Hill Art Village in Taipei, and our research question is, how have art and government collaboration transformed Treasure Hill from an illegal hillside settlement into a living artist village that reimagines memory, heritage, and belonging in Taipei's urban landscape?
Well, if you were to visit Treasure Hill in Taipei today, it would feel more like a ramshackle hillside village than a formal museum. Treasure Hill, or in Mandarin, 宝藏岩, began as an informal settlement. In the 1950s, Taiwanese veterans and immigrants built shanty towns on the hill by the riverside.
And for decades, it was an illegal squatter village, which had narrow alleys winding between eclectic houses. Taipei City saw it as an eyesore and slated it for demolition in the 1980s.
But as Taiwan democratized in 1990s, activists and scholars came in. They argued that Treasure Hill was a living community worth saving. In 2004, the city even declared it a historic monument. By 2010, it reopened as the Treasure Hill Artist Village. So one begs the question, how is Treasure Hill run today?
Well, in practice, Treasure Hill today is run much like a creative hub. The Department of Cultural Affairs partners with a nonprofit to manage it. It houses an artist in residency program, small galleries, and a youth hostel tucked into the old huts. Artists from Taiwan and overseas come for residency. Occasionally, there are also workshops, exhibitions, or community houses. And in fact, some original residents still live upstairs or in adjacent quarters.
So, in other words, it's not an open mic. The city selects who presents here through official programs.
Right, and why all this fuss? Well, Treasure Hill's makeover is really Taipei's story in miniature. The 1980 city plan had already targeted Treasure Hill for removal and park redevelopment, making its later preservation a sharp break from earlier urban policy.
As Taiwan's politics changed, the government began celebrating grassroots culture, yet it also highlights the tension in Taipei's urban growth. On the one hand, the city now dubs itself as a creative city, encouraging artists and tourists to flock downtown. On the other hand, it still grappled with what to do with informal communities. Treasure Hill ultimately found itself in the middle, preserved under heritage law, while also being promoted as a quirky urban tourist spot.
When we first began looking at artists at Treasure Hill, the person who stood out was Cho Shan-han. He spent 4 months in residence from November 11, 2019 to February 29, 2020. And during that time, he created an entire project out of discarded sneaker boxes gathered from the busy commercial streets of Gongguan. What fascinated us was how he transformed these boxes into delicate till-like panels that resemble the small mosaic surfaces of older Treasure Hill houses.
The resemblance is uncanny. Rows of soft cardboard square arranged in the same rhythm and patterns you see along the walls of the old village. They echoed handmade construction methods that shaped Treasure Hills for decades. They never pretended to be part of that history.
The residency itself matters here. Cho's project was supported through the Taipei's Cultural Foundation. They encourage projects that speak on the site while reflecting the city's broader cultural vision. Reuse, sustainability, and creativity are especially visible within the artist village. And Cho's interest in discarded objects fits naturally into this environment. The result is a project that is both deeply personal and gently shaped by the institution that supported it.
Something else became clear as we researched this project. Cho's work echoed the broader story of Treasure Hill. For many years, the settlement was treated in a leftover corner of the city. It did not appear in official plans. It was also not considered valuable. That changed in the early 2000s when it reclassified as a group of buildings under Heritage Preservation Framework.
Cho's project mirrors that shift. He takes waste and turns it into a version of Treasure Hill's familiar mosaic surfaces. The old visual language survives, and the history behind it is quieted. The roughness, the necessity, and the improvisation that shaped the original tiles are not part of the artwork. He rebuilds a village look using materials that carry none of its hardship.
And that's the key connection. Treasure Hill has been preserved in a way that emphasizes charm and creativity. Much of its political and social history is harder to see in the present-day landscape. Cho recreated tiles may have a similar effect. They are beautiful and attentive to form, yet they do not reveal the circumstances that produced the original ones. They capture the surface while softening the story.
A place is protected, but its past is filtered. The appearance is preserved, but the conflict, struggle, and complexity that once defined it no longer guide the visitor's experience.
The case study shows that this is not only an individual artistic decision, is part of a larger process that supports certain interpretation of Treasure Hill and not others. Artist Residency Program and City-supported culture initiative help shape the public understanding of what Treasure Hill presents today. Projects like Cho's honors the past visually, yet they also reflects the new identity that the village has been given.
While all this sounds ideal, the reality is naughty. Saving Treasure Hill wasn't much more about politics as it was about art. Taiwan's new leaders in the early 2000s liked the idea of legitimizing an underdog community as heritage. It made the city look democratic and inclusive, but at the same time, Taipei's push to reinvent itself economically meant shaping Treasure Hill to fit a marketable image.
Right, and Taipei very much museum-fied Treasure Hill. The Taipei Cultural Foundation even puts it under a cultural bureaucracy. The long-time residents and local shopkeepers often felt like passive figures in this process. Some saw their house depicted almost as a living exhibit.
This government-artist collaboration brought resources but also control. On the plus side, the arrangement fixed leaks, added plumbing, and kept people from being evicted. It even created jobs and new community spaces.
Well, in that sense, the co-management succeeded in preserving the physical site, but it also imposed the rules. The Department of Cultural Affairs set the agendas now. It runs grant program and invites artist groups through things like the Global Activist Participation Project. Such partnerships are often promoted as grassroots. In reality, they can mirror the criticism of public art writ large.
Which exactly brings us to the core tension: authenticity, control, and participation. What does authentic mean in a place like Treasure Hill?
Some say its value lies in the unplanned, homespun way people live there. In the repackaging process, elements of daily life and the lived culture of ordinary people can get overshadowed by performance.
Which ties back to what we have been mapping. One study found that mixing the original low-income residents with new artists in fixed buildings actually led many villagers to leave. The co-living model, which heroic an idea, ended up straining the social fabric. It seems that a key form of art intervention, what a Taiwanese planner called artivism, can be double-edged. On one hand, artivist projects did bring people together and build a sense of place. On the other hand, they sometimes highlighted the gap. Local elders asking, who is this art for? While outsiders frame the story.
Yeah, and even academically, Treasure Hill raised the question, whose heritage? The city owns much of the land now, and official guides talk about restoring Squatter Village for public good. But for some people who used to live there, the best tale is about the neighborhood and the temple festivals, which is hard to put into brochures.
And I guess this sort of tension between local memory and curated image is classic in heritage debates. It shows how planning and everyday memories of streets, rituals, and family shape urban identity, and perhaps reflecting Sir To's belief that community vitality comes from resident, not official reconstruction.
Right. Yet once the Government Culture Bureau steps in, much of the programming becomes structured. Activities like film screening and annual art festivals did connect with some villagers, but overall vision came from above. Without genuine participation, art can turn ordinary people into mere spectators.
Yeah, so as we wrap up, Treasure Hill leaves us with larger questions about urban memory and art's role in the city. The village on the hill remains alive with contrast. Community event posters next to murals, quiet temples next to hip cafes.
It shows how the past can be preserved, rewritten, or even consumed. On the one hand, it celebrates a slice of Taipei's identity that might have been lost. On the other hand, it reminds us that memory in the city is contested. Whose story gets told and how?
In a way, you can almost see Taipei wrestling with its identity in those painted walls and narrow lanes. Treasure Hill represented a spatial formation whose identity was inseparable from its physical and cultural site circumstances rather than urban planning.
The mixed legacy suggests that art in public space can spark dialogues about urban belonging, but it can solve the question on its own. But if we frame art as something emerging from a community, it can give people a voice about how we remember our streets. Thank you for listening to our episode.
And we hope our exploration of Treasure Hill and Cho Shan-han's residency offered a new way to think about how art shapes the story a city tells about itself.